Yeah.
wasn't there.
That's okay, no problem for you?
No problem. I'll use this though.
Yeah.
Because that.
Yeah.
I've got a
No,
bit sticky.
I'm doing out of habit. Just do whatever you feel is perfect. No problem. And but don't worry, if anything glitch, I can just come up and help you with it.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much for stepping in there. That's so
No
great.
worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
It would be wonderful.
It's good to have something at the end of the year
Yeah.
to see
Yeah,
everyone.
130. It's great. I'm not sure how many would show up, but I sent a reminder yesterday.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to have you here. So, welcome everyone to our end-of-year event, the end-of-year event for the SA Women's Health Research Translation Network. We're really looking forward to this evening. We think that we've got some fantastic speakers, and we also feel very confident that you're going to have lots of opportunities afterwards for some heavy-duty networking. So my name is Deb Turnbull, and I'm at the University of Adelaide, and I'm the co-chair for the SA chapter of WHRTN, together with my colleague Marion Eckert, who sends her regards to you all tonight. Now, our theme for this evening is about inspiring journeys. We're very conscious of the fact that oftentimes in our careers, we need to, hear a narrative that keeps us going, that keeps us inspired. And so we've got some speakers here that are reflecting on their inspiring journeys. So I'd like to begin formally, and I'd like to, on behalf of us all, to acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, and the fact that we recognise the Kaurna people's cultural, spiritual, physical and emotional connection with the land. And on behalf of us all, I would like to pay our respects to the Kaurna elders, both past, present and into the future, and all of the generations of Kaurna people and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are here today. So this is our program for this evening. We're going to have some presentations, there'll be a chance for a panel discussion, and then after that you're going to hear from and see the fellows who have recently been awarded their fellowships, their WHRTN fellowships. They're going to be receiving their certificates this evening. And as I said, afterwards there'll be loads of opportunities for networking. So some housekeeping, the toilets are in the foyer, and in the unlikely event of an emergency, what we'd like you to do is meet at the assembly point outside the Royal Adelaide Hospital over here. And we've got a photographer this evening taking photographs, and the event will also be recorded. So what I'd like to do is begin by introducing you to our first speaker, Dr. Leanna Reid. And Leanna's here this evening to, I guess, help to put WHRTN into a context for you. So Dr. Reid has broad-ranging executive board and investment experience in health translation and in a range of technology-based enterprises. She served as CEO and chair of the Cooperative Research Centre for Cell Therapy Manufacturing until October 2019, a collaboration that resulted in the formation of 2 companies that were founded and led by scientists. So obviously a classic example of science and impact and industry, in action. So in addition, Leanna was the chief scientist for our state from 2014 to 2018, and she's got extensive experience in innovation, collaboration across government, industry and academic sectors. Welcome, Leanna.
Thank you, Deb, and it's an honour to be here tonight to recognise and celebrate some great researchers and hear some inspiring stories, which I'm really looking forward to. Just very briefly, I guess we're here tonight about networking and translation of science, and they're the 2 things that get me up in the morning. I always have from a very early time realised what I like doing is putting science into practice, and that's what we're about. Increasingly, that needs really quite wide, broad collaboration because it used to be we'd do our research in a small lab on our own and publish it and all the rest of it, and we'd get recognition for that, and that was good. But for various reasons, there has been a growing need to have much larger collaborative efforts. I mean, firstly, the technological developments are so promising, exciting and available that, we'd only dreamt about or didn't even know about, not that long ago. But you can't do those things in isolation because they need so many different skills and capabilities. I guess the second aspect about it is that increasingly there's a focus on saying not just doing the research, but also playing a role in making it happen in terms of healthcare benefits. Again, that needs a totally different set of skills. The final thing, I guess, is the carrots, the budgets, the grants that come to funding research, which used to be much more about the small discovery grants, but these days have increasingly become the large grants and translation focused. So MRFF is all about translation, for example. You've got big programs like cooperative research centres that I know and love. And that's all involving really widespread collaboration across a whole range of expertise from go to woe, bench to bedside. So increasingly that's what we have to do, and these kinds of networks are going to be crucial for that to happen. The other thing we need to do, of course, is build the capability across those different skill sets. We all have to learn a new set of skills, but as I often say, in a big collaborative network, you don't actually have to change your stripes that much. You can still remain what you are. You might be a patent lawyer, you might be a clinical researcher, you might be a bench scientist. You don't have to become all those other things yourself, and a lot of people get a bit nervous about going into some of these translation type programs because they say, well, that's not my skills. The important thing is you build around you a team of people that has that group of expertise, and together you work and you do what your own strength is, but the output is very, very synergistic. And I've seen that work so well so many different times. Being more collaborative, building the skill base to do that. And that's going to benefit us all much more because, of course, we are going to be able to take our science through to practice. We mentioned the company I chair, for example, Karina. We are, as we speak, just starting our first patient enrolled in a trial of CAR T therapy, which is the curative immune therapies, we hope, in our case for solid tumours. We have a patient at Royal Adelaide Hospital. Her cells are in Melbourne at the moment being transfected with the markers to recognise the cancer that she has. So on December 11, we hope we will actually be treating our first CAR T patient in an exciting clinical trial that, who knows, we hope might be curative for cancer. That took a huge amount of different expertise along the way, as an example. So, in final, the role of HTSA, I think I've already mentioned that, but this is exactly the space that HTSA is in. It's an absolute pleasure to be chair of that organisation, and Wendy has a wonderful team and is a great leader. And it's all about saying how do we help people translate research into practice and build those collaborative teams and upskill the people that we need to do this. So I think HTSA is, it's now, how many years now? About 5, 6? Really in a place of its own now, and a number of these similar organisations nationally really is starting to get its own place as a major influencer, I think, of government policy. And we're very privileged to have our statewide Health Translation SA in operation and just growing from strength to strength. And I am hopeful, confident that we will play a major role in the implementation of the state's health and medical research strategy. Certainly, Wendy's doing all she can to make sure that happens. So with that, I'm delighted to, I guess, hand back to Deb to move on with our exciting presentations, and I really look forward to that, and then to our presentations of awards. Thanks, Deb.
Okay, so we thought that, given what Leanna said about the importance of working across sectors to be totally engaged, to be connected, that it would be helpful for us to share with you what WHRTN actually is, how it operates, how it's funded, and what our mission is. So I'm going to do that briefly, and then you'll hear from our panel. So WHRTN really came about as a consequence of some visions by the Australian Health Research Alliance, or ARA, that formed this national Women's Health Research Translation Network. So this network spreads across the country, and we're very lucky also to be a big part of that. It's a national collaboration, and it comprises of community. It's got a very strong consumer representation. I was recently at the national meeting, and it was amazing to see the consumers play a role there. Health services and academic institutions. So it's really meant to bring together a structure that permits implementation science. Supported by an MRFF grant, and also some support through an establishment grant for the original ARA centres. It's led by a national steering committee. The state of South Australia obviously has representation on that committee, and we have representation across 11 research translation centres and 3 centres for innovation in regional health. And one of the things that I'm really excited about as a co-chair is that, you know, every time the opportunities come up for the fellowship program, for example, SA is always in there. We've always got fantastic applicants who are competing very successfully. It's based here at SAMRI, and importantly, it's an accredited ARA centre, so it's got that important recognition. Its vision, or our vision, is fairly straightforward. It's to empower and improve equity, health and quality of life for all Australian women. It integrates prevention, healthcare, research and translation for community benefit. And the second part, I guess, of the mission, if you will, is to do with advancing the careers of women researchers. So our aims are to boost national and international collaboration on women's health, to build workforce capacity, to develop leadership, and you'll see some of that really at play this evening, and to advance research and translation to, as Leanna said, to deliver impact, to change lives. Now, we operate in a highly strategic fashion insofar as our work is aligned with the 9 priority areas of the National Women's Health Policy. The area that we've been particularly active in is with regard to healthy ageing, but you will hear from the fellows tonight that it really does cross many different aspects of the priority areas of our work. And lastly, our purpose is to build capacity and, importantly, to create opportunities. And we do that in part by implementing evenings like this one. And really, a big component of our work is supporting and uplifting early and mid-career researchers, and to hear and share insights. And that's really about what tonight is about. It's about sharing insights, not just about success, but to be really truthful about the challenges that our leadership have faced. So the first speaker for this evening is Professor Helena Teede, AM, and she is going to give, I think, a warts and all characterisation of her career. So to give you a sense of Helena's background, she holds leadership roles across healthcare, research and policy, including as the Director of Monash Health Centre for Health Research Implementation. She is she's got extensive 20-year academic career experience with numerous fellowships, and she's dedicated to women's health research. So, Helena, welcome to you.
Thanks so much. I'm going to start by being opportunistic. I'm not going to use the slides I was using because I've just changed my brief. So I'm just going to speak, as you said, of warts and all. So I'm an endocrinologist, I'm a clinician, I'm an academic, I have 2 children, and I'm married to someone who's just as busy as I am, who's also a clinician academic. And I've been around a little while. And when I first graduated, I went, well, I want to do what all my mentors are doing. Henry Berger, who was one of the doyens of endocrinology, was one of my mentors. And I said, well, I don't want an academic clinical career. I'd be home with my kids, I would have time with my partner, just like all my male colleagues. And I couldn't find a female mentor because there were very, very few specialists at that time who were female. And if they were, they either said, I'm not having a family, or they said, I'm primarily having a family and I'm not necessarily going to be able to really dedicate myself to my career. And I didn't want that. So I had to go and get male mentors, one of whom over my career is South Australian. Wendy said she was going to ask me who was the person. So Rob Norman, who is from Adelaide, has probably been my staunchest supporter and mentor throughout my career. And for what it's worth, the evidence shows we do much better with male mentors, in fact, than we do with females. Females are really supportive, they're great, but they're not the ones to say, actually, you can do that. Just get out there and go for it. So making us think differently. But I have had an incredibly fortunate career, and one of the things that I did quite early on was I got tapped on the shoulder to do an exec MBA, and that's after doing my medical degree and my specialty degree and my PhD. I thought it was enough. But I didn't say no because it was the CEO who tapped me on the shoulder, and I was just not very good. I'm a recovering people pleaser, so I'm not very good at saying no. So I unwittingly said yes, and it is unequivocally the best thing I ever did, because even though it was part-time, it completely got me out of my imposter syndrome about not being a leader and not necessarily stepping up and not necessarily being able to do a job, to a situation where I understood my purpose. To this day, I've held true to that. And I knew why I would take on a role, and I knew what I would do with it, and I knew when to leave it. And those 4 things were really important. I've never had an ambition. I've never had a career trajectory. People cannot ask me where I'm going to be in 2 years or 5 years, and I'll tell you, because I've got no idea. And the reason I've got no idea is it's all about what impact and what influence and what difference I can make, and I will go where I have that opportunity to be able to make that difference. And because that's my purpose, I can quite comfortably now be quite courageous and take on really big, gnarly, difficult, challenging roles and fail. And that's okay, because I knew I went into it for the right reason. I went into it for a purpose. I went into it to make a difference. And the other reason is I'm very much a democratic consensus leader, as Wendy knows. In other words, I don't have to have the great ideas. I just have to get the great people together and set up the systems and processes and governance for those great ideas to come out, and for the vision to happen, and for people to get in the same boat and row in the same direction. And if I do that, great things will happen, and they don't have to be my ideas. And learning that was really empowering for me, to be able to then do that myself. But then what struck me was that, how come no one ever told me this? How come I was stuck in the paradigm of I can't do this? I was tapped on the shoulder when I was 39 for a role that was a professorial role. So I was just up for my associate professorship. That was about where my track record was. This was a not-for-profit with a combined university role. They tapped me on the shoulder multiple times, and I said, look, I really don't think I can do it. I don't deserve it. I'm only at an A-prof level. I'm juggling all these other things. And I said, no, thanks. And then finally the board chair came back and said to me, we've tapped you on the shoulder because we know you can do this. We really want you to look at the role. So I said, all right, well, give it to me as associate professor because that's where I'm at. And don't give me a 5-year contract because I'm not sure if I can do it. Give me a 1. And he said, so let me get this straight. You want me to pay you less, give you a lesser role to do the job? No. What is wrong with you? I would not have this discussion if you were a male. If you take the job, it's a professorial role, it's a 5-year contract, and we know you can do it. And I went, really? Was I that person? And that was one of those sort of aha moments where I stepped up and went, no, I can do this. And I think one of the really critical things that I went, well, does it align with my purpose to make a difference? Does it have to be me? Which is one of the other questions I asked myself. The other really important thing is, what am I going to give up to do it? Because you just can't keep loading. And it's, am I going to make a real difference in this role? And that's actually allowed me to be really courageous. And it's interesting, the other thing is I'm going to ask my favourite question. Who in this room, put your hand up, aspires to have power? You're not allowed to do that because you've done my leadership course. Who else in this room aspires to have power? And? Why would you aspire to have power? Great. Okay, so that's fairly typical. I've just sat in a room of 500 women in the police force, many of whom are quite senior, asked them the same question, not a single person in the room. Usually it's no one, sometimes it's one person. At the end of my exec MBA course, that moment, the facilitator said to me, do you aspire to have power? I said, no, under no circumstances. Because to me that was command, control, top-down, authoritative, all the things I hated, and all the things I just didn't want to go near leadership because of. And then he talked a little bit more about my purpose, which was to impact and influence and make things different. And he said to me, what right do you have to define power as authoritative, top-down command and control? The most effective form of power is to lead, to inspire others, to create a vision, to get them on a journey so they will row that boat in that direction whether you're in there or not. That is the most sustainable, most effective form of power. Now I'm going to ask you again. If you reshape power, who in this room would aspire to have power? Yep, lesson learned. So that for me was really, really critical, and it made me brave. That and those 4 questions. So I put my hand up for things like the first female president of our national society, the first female clinician, and then I went on to do that at international societies. I currently have fairly major roles at WHO. I've been in Wendy's role in Monash Partners. I've done lots of really brave things, and I have knocked on the door and worked really closely with every single health minister since I did that MBA. Because 85% of your politician's time is spent with gambling, food, tobacco, and mining. And I guarantee what you have to say is going to be better than them. So I got quite brave after that program and also spent a lot of time with my both local and federal ministers. And the other key lesson that I would take is long before consumer and community involvement became sexy, right from the start of my career, because it was about influence and impact, my purpose was to make things better for basically the people who fund and benefit from our healthcare system. I'm an incredibly strong advocate for a universal public health system, and I don't think, for example, as doctors, we necessarily take that responsibility on board. We look at the patient in front of us, and we do not necessarily see ourselves as custodians of the system. And it's really important that we do that, because there are so many things that would make our universal system, which is becoming more inequitable, falter. And you can see that beautifully in the NHS in the UK, which has just weakened and weakened and weakened their public system. You've now got the Mayo Clinic in the main streets in London. And if ever you're going to have the best health system in the world compared to the worst health system in the developed world, it's really quite scary. But if you are a really strong advocate of that, you have to believe that the community, who are the funders and the beneficiaries of healthcare, and are the funders and beneficiaries of research, actually have a really important role and accountability at the table. And so most of my research has been around what the priorities are with the consumers who have lived experience in that condition. And in fact, we started doing that around 2009. And again, it makes you really brave, makes you really strategic. You can be sure you're working on the right things. And it's moved me from mechanistic research into clinical trials, into, and we've got a paper coming out on that shortly about the responsibility for clinical trials to be implementable, but actually then into implementation science and public health, which is where I now operate. And I think I'm the only health services research fellow. We looked at the data the other day. There's just one tiny little slither of fellows who do health services research. But I think the real lesson was, if you bring people together, they will do the work for you about what the right thing is to do, from multiple different understanding scopes, from industry, from government, but especially from community. And it gives you the courage to go, okay, this is where we're going because we've all worked this out together. And then the final thing is just be really agile and think outside the square about solutions. So this beast that we are involved in is different. So I'm an academic, I live in that world where this is my track record. Believe me that what I'm telling you is really important and give me money to go away and do what I think is most important, which is the investigator-initiated paradigm that we have all grown up on. And the idea that I will create great things, and we've had a beautiful example of some of those going into practice. But actually, when I'm a clinician, that system is never going to help my drug-affected homeless youth who's bartering their insulin needles and not taking their insulin. That's never going to solve that problem. So that sort of concept of being able to have that iterative approach to research and that strategic, prioritised, MRFF-funded type of approach is really, really important. And I think we've now got a much better balance of that in Australia. I hope it does not change with the current proposal to merge the two streams. There are a lot of powers that be that would like to see them go back to the more conventional, powerful, investigator-initiated driven paradigm, and I really hope that doesn't happen. But interestingly, these centres are very much set up for stakeholder-driven, but they are hard because they're most powerful. The way we think of it, about the most influential, the experts, are used to the paradigm where I'm the expert and I'm going to tell you what it's all about and you're supposed to believe me and fund what I do. And that is very different to the space we're in. So we're often challenged by very powerful people and people who don't necessarily understand this. And I've said many times, if I get run over by a bus, there are a couple of things I'll be really proud of. One of them was setting up ARA. So our 4 centres, including South Australia, were the first 4 to be accredited. They didn't give us any money, but they gave us this lovely badge. And they said, off you go, you're there to drive research translation. Actually, they didn't say what you're there to do. They just said, we're giving you this badge. You're now a research translation centre. NHMRC gave us the award. They said, there you go, you're excellent. MRFF was supposed to be our funding vehicle, and they said, we don't care how excellent you are. We want to know, our measure of success is how many health services knock on your door and say, we need your help and find you useful and invest in you. And I actually made them sit next to each other, the head of NHMRC and the head of MRFF, and actually recognise that we're being accredited by one body for excellence and we were being supposedly funded and rewarded by the other body for solving problems in the health system, and they were not compatible. So they've come a long way with the centres and the journey. But all 4 centres were ready to go and compete with each other. They were running back, especially Monash and Melbourne and the little muddy river down the middle. They were going to go and compete with each other. And I remember sitting everyone down and saying, we have no right to do this. We're actually charged with making a difference. And why should someone in Alice Springs not have the ability to have the translation of research for youth mental health that the kids can get in Parkville? It's not our job to do that. That's not what we're here for. We're the antithesis of that competitive environment. And if we don't step up to that plate, no one's going to invest in us and we're not going to be valuable. Anyway, that seemed to be a reasonably compelling argument. And so we've actually come together as an amazing network. We console each other, support each other. I don't think we'd be there if all the directors couldn't get strength from each other because we are different to the current paradigm, which is very competitive. But it's brilliant to see that transition to recognising we're actually there for strategic benefit and output, and to see the collaboration between the regional centres and others. And Wharton grew out of that. That's where we came from, was one of the women's health networks, and that has been really challenging because I was the lead investigator on a $5 million grant. So I was the one who got the grant and had to report and was CIA and was accountable, but I had no control over what we did because it was a completely paradigm flipped. We all worked together as a steering committee and we decided collectively what to do. We got the consumers to set a lot of our priorities, and we didn't work in the same way. We changed the rules. We actually had consumer-driven research and consumer partnership, one CI for every CI who's a consumer. We had all sorts of learnings along the way. We had seed grants. You have to demonstrate feasibility, you have to get the literature review, you have to get all your consumers on board before you actually get funded for the grant that's genuinely co-designed. So there was lots of pain and lots of learnings, but lots of benefits. We're now working directly with MRFF because they want that model of research funding which is staged. Because interestingly, as we heard the other day, 50% of all clinical trials that are funded by MRFF and NHMRC do not publish one single paper, even a protocol. And because that is the vast majority of MRFF and the vast majority of NHMRC funding, that research wastage is astounding. So the fact that we have not got a better way of actually, it doesn't mean they don't do research, but it means they didn't succeed in delivering. So how do we make sure that our systems give seed funding so we can all be much better, we can come up with projects that are co-designed and feasible and going to make a difference. So they're the sorts of things we're now doing, and it turns out that Wharton and our model is actually exactly what they were looking at, and they're now saying, well, actually, this is what we want to adopt. And that's because we co-designed it together. So I'm going to stop now. I think that's the brief that you actually gave me. Been lots of fun. I don't think I would say I've been to work a day in the last 20 years, because I don't actually go to work, I go to make a difference, and to me that's been an incredible privilege, and working with many people in this room, actually. So I'm going to commend you to the other speakers, but don't be afraid to fail, and do not be afraid of having power if you understand what that is and what it means for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Musa. Okay. Do you feel exhausted? Yeah. Helena, that was quite amazing, and I think you know, it highlights your invitation, if you like, for us to, you know, perhaps work differently and to make sure that we're totally out there. Yeah. So. With that in mind, what I want to do is introduce you to our next speaker, and Maria will be very well known to many of you, Professor Maria Makrides, because Maria did something, I think, which was pretty amazing insofar as she is the Executive Director of SAMRI. And so I feel really, you know, confident that SAMRI's, you know, transforming. It's transforming. It's going to be different. That there'll be more voices around the table, which is great. And Maria is the South Australian Scientist of the Year in 2022, and she's also an NHMRC Leadership Fellow. And her area of research is in clinical nutrition, with over 370 peer-reviewed publications in extremely prestigious, high-ranking journals. And the amazing thing about Maria is that I think she's an example of someone who has been, has had a singular laser focus on an area and has really made a difference in that area, and it's to do with infant food policy, pregnancy dietary guidelines, and infant feeding guidelines, amongst other things, to minimise the risk of childhood allergies. So welcome, Maria.
Thanks, Deb, for the introduction. Ganamir na Ganayarta na Tumpanthi. I would like to acknowledge that we are on Kaurna land and pay my respects to Kaurna elders past, present and emerging, and of course any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in the room. If someone had told me a year ago that I would be the Executive Director of SAMRI, I would have laughed at them. In actual fact, I think Shilpa said to me, you should apply for that position. Probably sitting right there, and I said, oh, no, that wouldn't be me. But here I am, and I'm pleased to be here, and hopefully can make a difference going forward. I wanted to just share a few little stories about women role models, advocates and mentors. And really it's probably about turning points in points of the career, and maybe not just formal mentorship, but something somebody said to you that just hit the spot and really sparked things going forward. I started my life as a dietitian, and worked out pretty quickly that I wasn't going to survive in the long term as a clinical dietitian in a hospital. And I started out thinking that really I could make a whole lot of difference if I actually did the research that changed nutritional policy or practice, and would make a far bigger impact than running around a hospital dealing on an individual patient level. And I think that's actually been my drive since the beginning, and I will sort of use the example of the omega-3 fatty acids, because that's actually been the complete journey from PhD to areas that I'm working in now. And so I started off thinking that, you know, if we could actually really understand the requirements for omega-3 fatty acids in the perinatal period, largely for babies or the unborn baby, we could really optimise the neurodevelopmental outcomes for children. And after 30 years, I think that's probably still true, but it actually hasn't been simple or straightforward. And what we've actually managed to work out over that 33-year period is probably just 3 facts. That if you're born healthy and at term, that you only really need the vegetable source of omega-3 fatty acids, and that there's enough in there, whether it's an infant formula or whatever, you don't need extra supplementation. And that wasn't always the case for infant formulas who were originally devoid, but the regulations have now changed, and that's the case. And if you're a pregnant woman and you want to look after the cognitive outcomes of your baby, you know, that they get enough from you. It's actually probably really only an issue for very preterm babies, where you really do need to meet what they would miss out if they were in the womb. And it's those children that are born less than 29 weeks of age that do have that specific requirement to match what they would get in the womb. And we have shown that if you do meet that requirement, you will actually improve the developmental outcomes and the IQ of these children long term. Along the way, probably what's probably most well known about our work is actually about preterm birth and omega-3 fatty acids and their role in reducing risk of prematurity. That was a side issue that came out of one of the studies that we then went on to specifically investigate and are now in an implementation phase. So that just gives you the history of the omega-3 fatty acids, but I'm just going to highlight a few key women where there has been some turning points. This is Susan Carlson, who was the doyen when I started my PhD in omega-3 fatty acids. And she reviewed one of my first papers, and unbeknownst to me, I was complaining about this wretched reviewer. And she did admit to me that actually she was the reviewer, and sat me down and said, you know, you actually need to make sure that this is going to be one of those landmark papers. It needed to be absolutely clear what you did and what the outcomes were, because this is going to be a really cited paper. Actually, it's my most highly cited paper, and it was done back in the early 90s, and when I was just starting out, there were still a lot of babies, unfortunately at the time, dying of sudden infant death syndrome. And the question was, how are these omega-3 fatty acids accumulating in the brain, and were there differences between breast and formula-fed infants? And in a wonderful collaboration with the SIDS Association and the pathology people, we were able to collect brain samples and plot DHA, the main omega-3 fatty acid, in the cortex, and show that it increased with breastfeeding, but was the rate of increase was much slower with formula feeding. At the time, formulas were quite devoid of omega-3 fatty acids. So this was a real structural composition, and people said, it happens in animals, but it doesn't happen in humans. But this was the example that it actually happens in humans, but not with the other fatty acids. The next person I want to highlight is Martha Neuringer, from Portland, Oregon, visual scientist, and really she was absolutely key to me, again in the early days, because when we first asked the question, okay, so the biochemistry changes, you see some differences in the brain, does it really make any difference? Can you actually notice anything different in the babies? She had done some seminal work in rhesus monkeys, so we wanted to set out to see, well, actually, can we actually see visual differences in the children? And one of the only few ways to measure visual development in pre-verbal children was using visual evoked potentials. And it was Martha who actually encouraged me that, yeah, I could go out and build this VEP machine where you can measure the brain waves of the visual cortex in response to different size checkerboard patterns that actually gives you an indication of the maturity of the visual pathway and the children to be able to resolve smaller and smaller checkerboard patterns. And that's what we did with the wonderful programming help of Terry Teo, who was just 15 at the time, programmed the checkerboard patterns and the reversing checkerboard patterns. And what we actually managed to show was that if you took the formulas of the day, supplemented them with fish oil, you actually did get better visual responses that were closer to those of breastfed babies. In other words, they were able to resolve smaller checkerboard patterns at both 4 months and 7 months of age. Now, you can imagine the explosion in the formula industry. This was the first published study of term-born babies that was done without funding from the formula industry, about what needed to happen, what didn't need to happen, various other changes that have happened since, and it all got very messy and polarising, and at that point I thought, well, I need to go and do a postdoc in something else, so I started working in iron. And I did a postdoc with Carolyn Crowther because I thought, well, I really need to learn how to do really, really high quality trials that are translatable. And I think what I learnt from Carolyn was that the question had to be really important. It had to be, and her view was, if it's not controversial, it's not worth doing. The outcomes had to be clinically relevant. VEPs were all very nice, but did it actually influence long-term outcome? And of course, the trial had to be done in a way that was pragmatic and directly relevant to practice. So coming back to Helena's point. So here I was, a dietitian in an obstetric department. They didn't quite know what to do with me. So I made lots of friends in the rest of the hospital. And one of those people was Janice Fletcher, who was a chemical pathologist, very interested in metabolic inborn errors of metabolism. My first piece of translational research was actually with Janice and working out phenylalanine portions and making it much easier for pregnant women who had PKU to control their phenylalanine and simplify not counting 30 milligram portions of lettuce leaves and millet seeds and actually titrate against their dried blood spots of phenylalanine. That changed the way PKU's managed, which I'm really proud of, but doesn't get a lot of talk. So fast forward probably 25 years, Janice is about to retire. We've got this great work around omega-3 fatty acids and the fact that, and a new practice guideline saying that women who are low in omega-3 fatty acids should be supplemented to reduce their risk of prematurity. Talking to Janice, she basically said, well, we need to implement this and we need to test it out. And the best way to do that is to add an omega-3 tick box to their SAMSAS form. She was retiring on the 24th of December. We got all the paperwork through to add the omega-3 tick box for the implementation study on the 21st of December. So long-term connections where you can come back to have become really important. Leanna, at about the same time, we're about to celebrate the 10th anniversary of this building. So this photograph was taken at the 10th anniversary of the Child Health Research Institute. And at about that time, when I was still walking around looking for other things to do, Leanna said to me, oh, you know, I'm on this committee for OSPN, and you'd make a much better person that would sit. Let me introduce you. You should join the executive committee of OSPN. And that introduction led me to get to know Aboya Nailassi incredibly well, who was the head of dietetics at the Alfred Hospital. Outstanding intensive care nutrition people that really opened my eyes to a whole different way of thinking, and then translating that back to neonatal intensive care, which actually then led to a whole range of other studies in neonatal intensive care about the way we deliver protein, the way we deliver fat, the way we deliver fatty acids, which actually opened up a whole new other way. Just highlighting some other wonderful people that I've worked with over the last years, over, you know, I think I'm starting to run over time, and, you know, that I've worked with and enjoyed and are doing great things themselves right now. Male champions end up being really important and pushing you forward as well, and it is true that male mentors are quite different to female mentors, and even if, you know, they're just pushing one forward in a completely different way. And the three people there, Andy McPhee, Bob Gibson, who I ended up marrying, and Phil Ryan, have been absolute champions in supporting my career going forward. So just a few dot points to finish in terms of a few learnings from my journey. Is one about keeping one's eye on the horizon and being clear about where you think you want to get to. But sometimes you need to keep testing that out and being flexible and actually adjusting that journey as whatever's appropriate. But don't cut any corners. It's actually about the quality of the work and the integrity that you bring to that work, and people like working with people with high integrity and are committed to quality. And the value of whatever the outcome is linked to the quality of that research process, and to learn and engage with as many people as you can, and the more diverse the better. Be generous. The generosity won't always be reciprocated, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to be generous. You need to act the same way. Be kind, and be kind to yourself and others. So don't give yourself an unnecessarily hard time. Have fun, celebrate with your friends and collaborators, and wherever you end up, it would have been worthwhile. So thank you very much.
Okay, so our next presenter is a very prominent Aboriginal health and wellbeing researcher in the areas of maternal and child health and youth and women's health. And Karen currently leads 3 NHMRC funded studies. So I think that sort of speaks to the, the real depth of her work. Karen is a Mintic and Watjo Baluk woman from southeastern South Australia and north-western Victoria. And she's worked for over 30 years in government and the non-government Aboriginal health and community service sectors. And this has included areas such as policy, planning, service development, management and advocacy, Aboriginal health and wellbeing, maternal and child health, and youth and women's health. So an amazing breadth of expertise. And in the past 10 years, she's worked in research specifically in the area of maternal and child health. Welcome.
Thank you. Can I just push the down button, is it? Yeah. Wow. Following on from these two people, I just wanted to say I'm not actually the CIA on those NHMRC grants. just don't want to overinflate. Okay. I work over at the Samri Women and Kids in the Aboriginal Community and Families Health Research Alliance, and we call it ACRA for short. I do want to acknowledge that we're here in Kaurna land, the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the land and waters of the Greater Adelaide Plains region, where we're meeting today, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge and pay respect to other Aboriginal people's cultural authority who might be present here at this gathering, and in the spirit of reconciliation, acknowledge the clinical and other knowledges and authority of non-Aboriginal people here today. And so yes, I'm Maintung Watchabaluk woman from my mother's side of the family, and my father came from Germany. And they had a big love affair and got married and did all that. It was wonderful. I just want to honour some trailblazers too. So the sepia photos are of my family, an extended family. And in the photo on the far left-hand side, the young girl at the top in the middle with the fabulous hair is my mum. I hope you can see it. I hope it's big enough so you can see it. And a couple of aunties over on the right-hand side. And my grandmother's woven baskets. So those two pieces of weaving are about 100 years old. So I've still got them at home. And some of these Aboriginal people here, I'm looking at that sand, the sandy beach, and so what we're doing here, I was a bit frightened when I saw that, this is about inspiring women, and thought, oh crikey. I can tell why other people are inspiring, and so some people walk in other people's footsteps or, build onto the shoulders, and others make their own tracks. And I just wanted to say that when I very first met Helena, one of the things that I really, really liked the most was I'd come into the meeting and I thought, oh crikey, what will I do here? Look at all these women, they're just amazing women. And then Helena's up there writing up, we're doing the strategy. And then she said, now, because somebody said, oh, I can see Indigenous is one of the priorities, but I can also see that it's in the principles. And Helena said, yes, that's right. We're having Indigenous in both as the priority for the health areas, but it's also a principle that we're thinking about Indigenous people. And I thought, wow, how about that? And I was there because Maria had noticed that the Aboriginal woman wasn't able to attend. So that was how I got the HTSA, the health translation area picked me to be involved in it as well, and I thought, wow, okay. So two really inspiring women, and thinking about the work that Shilpa does, like as a panel, you people all do, I'm saying you people, you four inspiring women do things in a clinical way. I just couldn't do that. That's not me to be doing anything like that. So I admire that. It's fantastic to be here with you. So our ACRA work links to the WHRTN priorities of preconception, pregnancy, postpartum and intrapartum health of women and babies and Indigenous health. And for us, as women, we know about the lifelong impacts of health and wellbeing and getting in early, and the maternal, child and family focus and health and other agencies involved to help them to be able to deliver those services well. And for Aboriginal people, that new life, that new beginning, how are we going to, there's a responsibility around Aboriginal culture that comes with every person as well in the community. So it's that renewal of that too. We do Aboriginal community research from the Aboriginal community's priorities, following respectful and ethical protocols for the benefit of Aboriginal people. And in doing that, sometimes that has a ripple effect out to the clinicians and services as well, that there's also, they have a benefit of that too. We are leading Aboriginal projects and activities. And we also work in difficult spaces because we want to make a difference. So we're working in areas of trauma, racism, lateral violence, and changing the narratives from the deficit model about, you know, look how sick Aboriginal people are, those fellas are always in jail, they're bashing and killing each other. We're trying to turn that around to more positive and strengths-based ways of describing things, because we wouldn't get to be 60,000 years and however many generations that is if that's how we were living and continuing to live. And the difficult place too. So we've heard it is difficult trying to work in research and work in services. And so we're working in the intercultural space as well and trying to look at, okay, we're women, you know, you can believe me, I can tell you the truth and I can tell you things that I know and it is true. Yes, I'm an Aboriginal woman and yes, I know about that too. So it's quite interesting to, in that space, and I have to see it that way. So I thought I would have a go at making a timeline. So I worked in policy and project work and program management and development, and did all of those sorts of things in government and non-government for probably about 25 years. And then when I came to research, I found that, you know, there's your track record. Where's your, you know, where are your grants? Where's this, where's that? And I'm thinking, oh, you know, maybe I shouldn't be in research. What the hell am I doing here? I'm not a clinician either. So it was everything, I was not this and I was not that. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute, there must be something there, because I'm noticing that I went to a meeting, they were all clinicians, and they wondered and they were talking about birthing business. And they were talking about why would you need midwives there? Why would you need, and I could see Aboriginal women was coming as a membership on the committee, and I could see that Aboriginal women was coming down the list, and it was, why do you need women? Like, why would they? What would they have to contribute to this? And I actually felt my womb contract, like I actually had a physical reaction to that. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to work like this? Anyway, that all changed. So this is what I brought to, and being an Aboriginal person and a mother and all that, I brought to working firstly in Wadley-Paringa for about maybe 5 or 6 months at the end of 2015, and then I started working over at Samri Women and Kids in about 2016. So I had been working alongside Stephanie Brown and her group at Intergenerational Health with the Aboriginal Families Study. We started discussions around 2008, I think, but we actually got a grant for that. And then when I started working over here, I'm going out like this because the hospital's over there where I'm based, and Philippa Middleton had the ABFAB targeted call. So what this is meant to be showing you, that arrow is the years, of course. What's on the top are the research projects or the funding sources, funding that we got to do those research projects. And what's underneath the arrow is impacts. So the Aboriginal Family Study actually helped the Aboriginal Family Birthing Program to get funding, for the state health to fund them with the AMIC workers. It also was it was used around the racism, so that was made racism one of the priority areas for the statewide Women's and Children's Health Network. Through the ABFAB program, it's a nutrition healthy weight for pregnancy and babies up to age 12 months. We tested that omega-3 that Maria was doing, and we wanted to find out, would Aboriginal women go for that? Because is there going to be a suspicion or what's going on? And that nobody said no to that. Then by about 2020, Yvonne Clark had been working with us for a year or two, and then she got an investigator grant, and around about 2020 we became co-leads in the ACRA. So this was, Maria's there as our theme leader. She could see the value of it. Yvonne and I are complementary in our skills. We're both Aboriginal women. We come from different areas in the state. We're both senior Aboriginal women, I guess you could say. We're talking about retiring, so that's on the horizon in about 5 years' time. I've been saying that for about 3 or 4 years. So we'll see how we go. And then the infant and toddler feeding study, and around about 2021, I'm thinking, was when we had the WHRTN Indigenous group, one of the subcommittees of the WHRTN, because I think WHRTN started around maybe 2019 we were talking about it, and 2020 it started. So there was, the lead up to it, seeing it, building it together was very exciting. And so Yvonne's investigator grant and what she brings, she's a clinical psychologist, so she's managed to get the Corkabubs project in 2021 and the eye care program that just started in March this year. And from our studies above the line, you can see that we were commissioned by the state government to do that protocol for the continuity of care for maternal and child health at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women. In South Australia, it's a systems statewide approach. The Department of Health and Wellbeing are now implementing that, so we feel like that's been a bit of a win. And from the ABFAB, we're just doing the data now. That was interrupted by COVID, and we've found that looking at the women who were in ABFAB and looking at the women who were not in ABFAB, it is reducing the gestational diabetes and reducing the preterm birth. So alongside those dates, those years, I don't know, I'm hoping you can see them, but in 2015 we had a big roundtable meeting in here about Aboriginal maternal and child health, and that was where the priorities came from, and there were all kinds of people involved here, including community and community workers. By 2017 we launched ACRA over at the Women's and Children's Hospital, and then since then every 2 years, so 2019, 2021 and 2023, this year, we've had our community accountability forums. And what we've been doing is we've got a record of the priority areas, we've rolled them up, we take it back to community and say, okay, 2 years ago these were the priorities, and then we do a traffic light thing and say red, yellow and green. We've either done them or finished them, or we haven't started. Are they still, this is where we're up to, are we still on the right track? And so it's been quite consistent. And this year, for the first time, instead of having one big forum, we've been travelling around. And that's been really useful. So I think I'm nearly finished. Challenges to overcome. I've had to put grief and loss there. So because there is a lot of grief and loss in our personal and our professional lives, and it could, for me, there was I don't have a PhD, and what was that qualification and what did that mean with experience? And so the research office helped me to look at that framework, so I didn't actually have to have the PhD. Sometimes we're not successful with a grant application. It's not the end of the world. That song buzzes around in my head about, when the going gets tough, get going. You just have to get up and shake it off. The people change, the focus may change. Mine's always been around Aboriginal business, but it has changed a little bit. The place where we are, and there's other changes that happen in our lives. And generally what happens for me is I just work harder. I just think, oh my God, I have to work harder. And that hasn't necessarily been a good thing, so I've sort of stopped that. So I still work hard, don't get me wrong. I'm trying not to send emails too late. And the referendum, the result of the referendum, whether you voted yes or no, that has really knocked the Aboriginal community, because the data is showing that the majority of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people did vote yes. And there are our young people, our teenagers, who, somehow adults think it's okay to say something. So, a young Nunga kid who's working at McDonald's, that somebody thinks it's okay to say, oh, are you Aboriginal? And the kid says yes, and then they say, oh, yeah, well, you didn't get your referendum, did you? That's horrible. So there's all that sort of thing, and we don't want it. Nobody wants their kids growing up with people speaking to them like that. Work-life balance. This is a work in progress. So put your hand up if you've got it nailed, your work-life balance. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I've just got a few things there. I do light painting. That's my photography there on the right-hand side at the top. I go on country. That's a scorpion there that's glowing under UV light. I'll go on country and help to take care of the place where my mother grew up. And we've got pets. So this is lessons learned. I think family and friends are really precious. Give them time, because they, I don't know about you, but for me it's kind of like, oh, how long since I've seen you? 1 year? Really? Was it 3 years ago? Like, time really passes. Hard work, so if you work hard, play hard, always be ready, because you never know what is going to come over the horizon, and be ready for that, because it could be something really good, a grant, might be a holiday, who knows what it is. And holidays, then make them holidays. Leave your phone at home, forget about your emails, or really try to limit that. Okay, just opening the door's not good either. And self-care, so we've got Yvonne working in our team, so we do a lot around how we take care of ourselves, because some of the things that we hear are pretty horrible. So I can't do, the physical clinical work, but the hearing things and how you kind of get that and how you manage that. And write. Whatever you're doing, write about it. Like, tell your story. And when I'm saying tell your story, I mean the story about your work that you're doing. Otherwise, how do people know about it? So what we're trying to do, and I'm doing it now, it's taken me this long, but writing about the process too, because the process is really important. And I didn't realise just how important it is for us to write our story about how we work with Aboriginal people and community with what we're trying to do. So that's me. Thank you.
I think the other thing that Karen didn't mention was that you and Maria were the predecessors to Marion and myself. Yeah. So it's because of, you know, this mob that we're all here tonight. So thanks. All right. So our next presenter is Associate Professor Shilpa Jesudason. And Shilpa is the lead of the CNARTS Clinical Research Group. She's the program lead for pregnancy and kidney research in Australia, and she's the co-lead of the International Society of Nephrology Train the Trainer program for pregnancy in kidney disease. And she's been really fundamental in working alongside First Nations peoples to transform healthcare in this area. I know that for sure.
Wow, what a series of women to follow, and I'm mindful that I stand between you and getting out there and networking and chatting, so I'm going to try to get through this fairly quickly. So I'd just like to firstly add my acknowledgement of the traditional custodians, the Kaurna people of this land. I would like to acknowledge that that land was never ceded. I would like to recognise that Aboriginal people still live with the long-lasting effects of colonisation, and I commit to doing everything that I can in my power, in my work, to decolonise the health systems that I work within for the benefit of Aboriginal people. So just a little bit about me. I was born in Fiji. My great-grandparents were brought to that country as part of the British indentured labourer system. And my parents, my father, who was born there, became a GP, went to India, met my mum. She was also a GP, and they went back to Fiji and came to Australia shortly after Cyclone Tracy, where we lived in Darwin briefly, as part of the workforce, medical workforce that was required after the cyclone. From there we moved to Adelaide, where I did my medical training and part of my nephrology renal training. I did a clinical research fellowship in the UK, working in the NHS, which is not what it used to be, that's for sure. So fortunate to have done it at a time when it was a very strong health system. Came back and did my PhD and had these two rat bags who continue to give me trouble. But that was a really lovely time, and very much an alumnus of the University of Adelaide. So that was how it started. And so how is it going? So now I am, and have been for some years, a hospital employee. So I'm a staff specialist nephrologist over at the Royal Adelaide. I have a whole range of clinical and research leadership roles in that capacity, but I'm fundamentally employed to provide clinical service. You can see all of the different roles that I hold. When I first started out, I was, it used to puzzle me, what are all these meetings and things that all my colleagues are going off to, because I had a very empty agenda. Now it's death by meetings and committees, but you can try and make a difference in all of those things that you do. And I appreciate the sentiments of the earlier speakers saying that if you take on something, what else are you going to drop? So it's a busy life, and I really love it, and I'm very privileged to do what I do. I work with some amazing people. I get to teach, I get to mentor, I get to see patients, and I get to do a whole lot of other fun things. So I thought I'd start with the challenges for a clinician scientist, such as myself. We always have competing priorities. It's not just the clinical and administrative workload, which kind of takes over everything, and I've got some of my team members here who know that sometimes I actually do drop them like hot potatoes because I have to run off and see a patient, and that's just the way it is. Finding paid time for research is really challenging. For most of my career, I've been part-time, and most of my research has actually been done in my own time. And when I write my investigator grant and I add up how much paid research time I have, the university always comes back to me and says, "Are you sure that that's not a typo, but actually that's how it is?" And there is this constant battle for funding, which I don't need to tell this group. It is like Survivor, okay? It's, and your goal is to outplay and outlast all of the other people in that funding pool, and getting into the game and staying in the game can be really, really challenging. And I welcome initiatives that change that, but I think there's still a lot more money that needs to come into the system as a starting point. But there are so many joys, and in the work that I do, I will never be bored. There is so much diversity. No 2 days are the same. I get to be many different things and inhabit many interesting roles and do lots of different projects, which you'll hear some about in a moment. It is a career of lifelong learning. I deliberately seek out new areas in which to play, and that keeps me learning and keeps me interested and engaged. And ultimately what I really love about the work that I do is I can actually directly do some research and make sure it gets embedded and translated into better care, not necessarily for the whole world, but certainly in my service, in my department, we can advance things. So these are some of the joys. So, you know what I'm saying here, right? You all know this. This is what I thought my career would be like. You do this, you do this, you do this, and then it's like, one step after another. Instead, it's this complete, spaghetti. But that's what makes it fun. And I actually say, I tell my kids, try and look for careers that will make you zigzag, because it's the zigzag that actually makes it worthwhile and keeps it interested and engaged. But it is a long game, and this is the long and winding road that is peppered with hard work, as we've heard about. You need that, but quite a bit of good luck, some bad luck, some strategy, but I don't pretend that I orchestrated my career in the way that it's gone. There's a lot of serendipity that's come in there as well. I will point out that it took 21 years for me to get to the job that I was training to do, which was to be a hospital kidney specialist, which is really the long game. So I feel like I'm actually very new in my career because it took me so long to get there. So it's been about 12 years from being a newbie consultant to now, and then I'll talk a little bit about what comes next afterwards. So just a few of the lessons that I've learned along the way, and I'll try and explain some of the research that I've done through these lessons. And the first one was, don't be afraid to change direction when you feel something's not right for you. So when I started my PhD, I did a PhD that was basic science, transplant immunology using non-human primate animal models, which was incredibly challenging. But at the time, under Toby Coates and Graham Russ, that was the only renal-based PhD that was going in Adelaide, and I knew I had to be in Adelaide. So I did a whole lot of work around dendritic cell immunotherapy to induce immune tolerance for transplantation, and then in my postdoc period, when I was trying to establish my own research career, I started to work down that field of using liposomes, nanoparticles, and other vehicles to modify dendritic cells, and also start to look at dendritic cells in pregnancy and preeclampsia. And I did that for a little while, and I realised that this was not going to be my long-term research career. It didn't speak to me. I became very dispassionate about it, and so in 2012 I really made this big decision to pivot to clinical research, which was hard because that was, I felt like I was abandoning my PhD. And that was a challenge, but it was absolutely the right thing to do. The problem is that there wasn't a lot of clinical research going that I could sort of jump on board with in my unit. We had clinical trials, largely industry sponsored. We had a lab, which I'd been in but wanted to get out of, and we had the registry, the ANZ Data Registry, which is now based here at SAMRI. But there wasn't much happening in terms of clinical research. And so this is my second lesson. If you don't have it, you have to build it yourself. And there's no, that's part of the challenge. And I've built 2 research teams, and I've really enjoyed creating something from nothing. So the first research team is the CNARTS, and CNARTS stands for Central Northern Adelaide Renal Transplantation Service, which is a bit of a mouthful, which is why we call it CNARTS. And the first one was the CNARTS Clinical Research Group, which I started in 2015. And really what we wanted to do in this was support medical nursing and allied health research within our unit and embed a culture of research into our daily clinical practice, because we could sense that if we did that, we would actually improve the care that we were giving to patients. And this research group has really grown over the last few years and doing an amazing range of work now that really wasn't, I didn't anticipate all of the different areas it would take us into, but we have a lot of patient-centred research studies that are designed for clinical practice change. We do a lot of work around the symptom burden of dialysis, a huge project around fear of dialysis needles, working with psychology, a lot of work around gut health and nutrition in chronic kidney disease, a large piece of work around improving Indigenous kidney care, working with many collaborators, and looking at exercise and physical function in chronic kidney disease. And these things, these sort of themes and projects have actually led to some tangible new tools, education modules for patients and clinicians, embedding exercise physiologists into our department, doing and developing new dialysis services for First Nations people. So we can actually see the tangible things that have actually come out of that work, which is really exciting. It's allowed us to collaborate way beyond my field, and I've listed off here all of the people that I collaborate with who are not nephrologists, and that is actually a fun thing to do because, look, I love nephrologists, but I actually enjoy getting out of nephrology and meeting people from all different disciplines, and that's another thing that keeps it really interesting for me. And you can see we collaborate across lots of different research institutions and disciplines and departments. And we're now starting to get, the students coming through and the grants and the papers and, as I mentioned, translating that work, which is very exciting. The other thing that I have learnt is that you have to find a clinical problem that you're passionate about. And for me, after my personal journey of having kids and then being one of the few women in my department, I would be sent all of the women to see because, it was very difficult for men to have conversations with women about women's health issues, God forbid. And the patients would be asking lots of difficult questions about pregnancy and kidney disease, about whether they can have a baby and what are the risks. So that led me to develop a clinical and research program in obstetric nephrology, which really didn't exist. There was absolutely no interest in Australia in this field. And I was really like a dog with a bone and had to be sort of banging on about this area for a long time, starting to develop the evidence base and developing clinical services. Over the first decade, we set up an obstetric nephrology service, spread it to lots of different hospitals, trained a lot of the junior doctors coming through and have seen lots and lots of patients. In the last year, we've taken this to develop some statewide and national initiatives, which has been fantastic, really putting obstetric nephrology on the map and making it a core part of business for the care of women with chronic kidney disease, not just something that you send the patient to see a female nephrologist for. And what I'm really proud of is that I'm now leading this global program where we're going to embed obstetric nephrology curriculum and education and training into dozens of countries around the world and really take this global and make it an important issue across low and high income resource settings. Underpinning all of this, we have a research program that looks at defining the patient voice, looking at the data that we have, how to do risk assessment, what are some of the outcomes, building the data infrastructure for the future and developing mechanisms to support the really difficult decisions that patients and clinicians have to make. And it's all underpinned by this incredibly engaged national consumer group who are now our co-authors, they're on our grants, they work with us very closely, an incredibly engaged group of women, and they inspire us all the time. And of course, what it's led to is that we have been able to help women, every single one of these babies, their mother was told it's too dangerous for you to have a baby. And we've been able to navigate them to clearly successful pregnancy outcomes, which is really what I live for. I actually only do this to have the babies come back to clinic so that I can give them a cuddle. It's wonderful. One of the other things I've learnt is, oh gosh, it's so much better when you put patients in the driver's seat. And we've done this in, I've just explained the pregnancy work, but in our, I've been privileged to work with the Action Aboriginal Research Group and learned so much through that process. And, I'm also part of a Centre of Research Excellence around patient partnership for kidney disease. We had a workshop for that just in this room yesterday, and you just walk away with absolute gems from the patients that you bring to the table, and we now are really turning consumers and patients into researchers, which is our goal for the future, because it makes our research better. I've jumped off a cliff a couple of times and moved right away from hospital-based care into not-for-profit and non-government organisations. So for 4 years I was the Clinical Director of Kidney Health Australia. That was a tap-on-the-shoulder role, and I went through everything that we've heard about before. Really, me? Why me? Why not? The clinical directors had historically been retired men. It was one of the best things that I ever did, and I had an opportunity to work with government to shape national kidney policy for the next 10 years, which was absolutely fantastic, and did a whole lot of work in advancing First Nations community voices to underpin guidelines. So that's been a really incredible experience, whereas I was able to take some of my training and put my 2 cents worth in to anyone who would listen to try and shape kidney care. And the other thing I've been able to do is actually take it all back to where I came from. So my father, before he died, set up the second medical school in Fiji. I've been privileged to be able to go back there regularly and teach and work with the International Society of Nephrology to actually develop nephrology in Fiji. Over the last 8 years, they've gone from having no nephrologists to now 3 nephrologists, a whole bunch of people coming through the pipeline, and just in October I was there and we launched the Nephrology Society of Fiji. So it's about sort of closing the loop sometimes as well, and helping things grow. So just to finish off, what comes next? Yes, of course, I'll be interested in papers and grants and impact factors and all of those things that we need to function in this academic world. But actually what I want to be is dirt. I want to be the soil that helps things grow. I want to spend the next 10 years growing research capability locally and in every field that I'm involved in. I want to grow research teams and networks. I want to have a lasting research culture change in my unit. And I'm unashamedly ambitious about precipitating a global revolution around women's health in kidney disease, and I think we can do it, and we've got momentum happening around it now. But mostly I want to keep it interesting for myself so that I turn up every day and bring my best. It takes an absolute village. This is just a snapshot of people who I have worked with, who have supported and helped along the way and brought incredible collaborations. Of course, the funding bodies that support us. We run on the smell of an oily rag, often in hospital-based research, but we still can make things happen. So I'd like to thank Wendy and Deb for inviting me to speak today, and thank you for listening.
Okay, I'm going to send people to the chair now. So if our speakers would like to come up and sit on a green chair, that would be fabulous. Look, thanks, Shilpa. That was a great story. Thanks, Helena, for kicking us off. That was really terrific to have you here and hear your story. Karen, Maria, put your hands together again. That was amazing. I've had the pleasure, me also being an imposter, have had the pleasure to be working with Helena over the time since I've been in this role. So, I'd like to acknowledge the important impact that she's been able to have on my career as well. But I guess today we've got a short opportunity to have a little bit of a panel discussion. So there are some mics, I think. We better get the mics out and about. The mics. So if anyone's got a question out there, please think about it and be ready to answer it. I'll just grab the mics here. So anyone got a question to start us with? Got a question to kick us off? Okay, no questions? Come on, someone can get us started. No? Okay, I'll kick it off. And so what I posed to the panel prior to, think about someone, a person, an event or something that really helped you succeed. Some of them alluded to it through their talks, so that's okay, you can think of another one. But to me, there was a couple of people in my life that said, go for it, girl, you can do this, you know. I acknowledge the important role Leanna plays in the role I play now as the CEO of Health Translation SA. Having a board chair that will challenge me but also will support me and help guide conversations is really important. So I just wonder if there's something that each of you would like to just reflect on and give to the crowd of something that made a difference to you. Want to start us off, Maria? I wonder why is this doing this? Okay.
I think the single, I mean, there have been many people, but the person who really transformed my life actually is no longer even in the kidney space, but was the CEO of Kidney Health Australia at the time where I was organising a conference, and she must have seen something in me at that conference, took me out to breakfast and said, I'd like you to be the next medical director of Kidney Health Australia. Completely random. Now, she that's how she functioned, and she only lasted for 4 months as CEO after I joined, probably because she was making crazy decisions like that. But it was, it took me from being where I was as a early career researcher and junior clinician to being on every committee, every panel, being involved in everything in nephrology. And was absolutely transformative. So I thank Michaela Stafracci, that was her name, and she changed my life.
Helena, you've got anyone? Oh, you mentioned Rob
Yeah, so
Norman
I might go
earlier.
back.
What about an event? Oh, you mentioned the course you did. Was there anything else there?
Yeah, so I'm going to make a slightly different reflection. Do something about feedback?
Yeah,
thanks.
Can you turn it down a bit?
So this might be very slightly controversial as women in this room, but actually my children have been really important in grounding me, because I work very hard and work-life balance. In fact, I don't even try to balance. I have integration. But I actually think having a family was incredibly important to ground me and stop me from, and I think sometimes as women, whether it's children or whether it's family, we keep our real grounding, and being a clinician is also really important in terms of being grounded and not floating up into what you can often end up being in a self-absorbed career. But in terms of people, so I'll use Rob because he's from South Australia, a spectacular mentor, but actually then became a sponsor and did things like, I just got this little email that popped into my email box one day that said, congratulations on your Order of Australia AM. Now, I had no idea. It's a 2-year process. The AM is, I didn't even know at the time, is the level up, and you've got to have all these international achievements to get there. And it was a huge amount of work, and it was just an email in my inbox. And the first thing I did was go, oh, I'm really uncomfortable with this, because this is not just my work, this is my whole team. I don't actually enjoy getting accolades. They're just something I am not necessarily comfortable with. And anyway, I rang Rob and I said, I know you're responsible for this, and we talked about it. And I talked about not necessarily being comfortable. And he said, actually, you've got to recognise this is recognition for your team and you as the leader in that team. Make it about your team, but be comfortable with it, because it will open a lot of doors and it will give you more opportunity to have influence, which is what you want to do. And it's interesting because since then he's done that again, and I now have a fellowship at the College of O&G in Australia, and now a fellowship at the College of O&G in the UK. And I'm not an obstetrician. And I think it's interesting because we have worked together in many, many things, and I've got many other mentors that have been amazing. But I think for me, Wendy, it's about having mentors. That's one, but I've had many others. And having whatever it is that grounds you in your life so that you can keep that balance between having an amazing job and amazing work, but still having something to ground you in your life, whatever that is.
So. Thank you. Karen.
So my 2 adult children have been scheming about how I can reduce my hours. So I didn't work on Sunday. So yes. I suppose my parents had a lot to do with it, because at that, when I was growing up, I don't know whether we had these kind of women's gatherings, and both of my parents told me that I should be doing maths, and at that time I thought it was, you know, quite unusual. Of course we had girls doing maths as well as the boys in the class, but the fact that they both really wanted me to do that, so
I couldn't quite get it. I couldn't get the maths. So I did some sciences but couldn't do the maths. I have had a number of mentors which have been just wonderful at different times. Sometimes I was the CEO at a community-controlled health organisation, and you know what it's like when you're working with a non-government organisation. You might be related to some of the people who are on the board or definitely in the community, and there might be some difficult things. So it's always really, really good to have somebody else who can see, you know, what you're doing and what's actually happening, and just to have somebody different to talk about those kind of issues, because you can't afford to be totally killing relationships off with key community people. But probably one I will talk about is, I said that sometimes grief is, so you would know about the death rate and all that sort of thing in our community, and so but that's not the only form of grief. I went to a Healing Our Spirit Worldwide conference a number of years ago now, and there was a senior Māori man there, and he talked to us about that, and he said that, you know, when these things happen and you're grieving, you must take time to grieve, but don't let it overwhelm you, don't wallow in it, because when you stop and look around, there's other people who also are looking to you, or other people who need you, and you need to be available, that you still have a purpose, and you need to, you know, get up and do that. So that's really stuck with me for many years, and I think that has helped me over the years, because we can all get buried in our work or get lost in our grief.
Thanks, Karen. Maria.
I'll take a different tack, and we've sometimes things that motivate you a block. So I won't actually name the situation, but when someone says to you or implies, actually you can't do that because you know, you're not a clinician, you're a woman, you're a this, you're a that. You know, there's been a couple of instances that I can think about where you just sort of click your heels and you say, well, we'll see about that, and just get on with it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm sure you can all think about your own journeys and the sort of experiences you've had, and hopefully, even if you're a young or a younger, you know, a developing person in this space, I'm sure you're already having those things, and hopefully you can see yourselves in these stories somewhere along there. And I think that's the value of stories, isn't it? That you can actually relate to them, and you can go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. And that's really the power of doing an event like this, and why HTSA decided that we would have a story night tonight, because we wanted people to be able to see themselves in the stories and see themselves in the journey they could be on. You might have already been on it to an extent, or you might be early on that journey, but we wanted people to be able to see themselves on the journey. So I think that's really important. Now, we're actually going to wrap up the panel and see if there's any questions out there in the big wide world. Yes, we've got a couple at the back, so we'll quickly go to those, and then...
While you're getting the microphone there, Wendy, can I just add one other thing?
Yeah.
I think that some of the most fun I have now, because we were talking about diversity and how research allows you to do different things. About 8 years ago, my CEO at my health service asked me would I be the spokesperson for the organisation on sexual harassment. And I have no more background in sexual harassment than I presume anyone else in the room. But it was because I was the only female doctor on the medical council. And interestingly, I did not say yes. I actually said, no, that's not my role, that's actually your role. But one of the reasons you're coming to me is you've got such an imbalance in your organisation. One thing I will do is help you change the culture of your organisation, and I used research to do that. And we now have 24 partners, 2 NHMRC partnership grants, about $6 million worth of funding, and a program that's just been funded to go through Asia and Africa and the UK, which is about how you use evidence-based to develop women in leadership in research and healthcare. And that's come from a need, so whether it's clinical, whether it's a system problem. And we now run, I've just come from this morning, our 16th leadership program this year, and some people from here have been at those programs. And it came from that concept of there's a problem, how do we use research and evidence to address it, and how do we bring lots of people together. And I have to say that's probably the most fun I have now in terms of reinvesting back in. And so if you are stuck, and people can either challenge you and you can step up to that, or you can go, I'm just not sure where I want to go and do some, really I would encourage you to do some leadership development training, because it can actually really change the way you think.
Well, certainly that was the experience I had. Not that this is about me tonight, but I'll tell you a little story. But I was lucky enough to do the Governor's Leadership Program here in South Australia, and if anyone knows about the Governor's Leadership Program, if you don't know about it, look into it. It's a fabulous year-long program, and I did that in 2012. Not anymore, you're saying? Yeah, but you can get scholarships for it? Yeah, so I guess don't see a block automatically in it, but if you can work out how to do it. I was working for a charity at the time. I got a half scholarship and I got someone to pay a bit and I paid a bit. So, that was how we did it. So basically those sort of opportunities, I think, leads to where you are saying that these courses, are out there and it's worth doing them because it changes the way you think. It might not just be the content you get for the course, but it's actually the way you think about things. So it's really important. Okay, we'll have one question up the back.
Actually, I think it's mostly answered. I was going to ask about leadership programs because I find I come to these events to get inspired. So I'm really thankful to the panel and to the event tonight, because I sit here and I feel like, I hear about that person in their life. I think, I wish I had somebody like that. So I think about leadership programs, and I was going to ask about that. But also, there's so many around the place, and, how do you choose one and what might be best? When Helena was saying the best thing about doing an MBA, I was told by colleagues in Sydney that they found their leadership programs within the Institute were worthless because they didn't teach you the real skills, and it wasn't until they went out and did business leadership courses that they learned the real important stuff. So that's now not quite a question.
Yeah, well, one of the program I did was actually about the diversity of the group. The people that were in it, and it was selected very purposefully, so you did have that opportunity for interaction with people that weren't the same as you, and you learnt there. Question here? Yep.
Yes. Thank you so much for an incredibly inspiring series of presentations. And I think there was a common thread throughout those regarding changes in direction that can happen for different reasons. And I guess also Helena talked about the sort of competition that can happen between investigator-driven science and translational science. And I guess a question for me as, a person who often feels like they have to wear a number of hats, is how have you dealt with the literature avalanche in each of those new areas that you've entered, and what's been your management approach there to sort of navigating that?
Really good question. I think we could all probably answer that. I think one of the things that I don't even need to be the expert in the area anymore. I need to have some legitimate expertise, but my role is as a leader. And I have, in that particular program, I've now got 7 PhD students doing PhD in gender equity. If you asked me that 7 years ago, wouldn't have thought it would happen. And they're from all different backgrounds. I learn a phenomenal amount from every one of them, and they all start with a systematic review, so I get to suck all that up. But I don't need to be the absolute paramount expert. Now, in some ways, I do. Like in PCOS, I'm the top ranked in the world. That's my thing. But in this space, it's primarily about leadership development. And so I think if you're brave and you're courageous, and I'm in that space because I'm an implementation scientist, and that's my expertise in leadership and implementation science. And so that's my angle there. But I don't profess to have expertise out that. And the other thing about the leadership development courses is don't think it's because they're expensive. The most expensive is often not necessarily the best. Get references from people who've done them. Do them. Corporate leadership is interesting, but often very differently motivated. It's about productivity and outputs, not necessarily about altruism and values. So just make sure that it aligns to your values as well. But I think you should, Shilpa described really well how she changed. So I think you become more comfortable with not having to be the expert in everything, but you need to know what your legitimate role is.
I think you've said it. I think also it's you have to be quite ruthless, I think. You can't be everything. And so you have to make choices, and those choices can be quite difficult. My advice would be make sure that they're choices that you're choosing, not choices that are foisted on you by external factors. So just be, really clear about how you're making those decisions and why you're making those decisions, and that you're the person actually in charge of those decisions, because you will have to choose and you will have to be ruthless in your choices.
Karen Maria? No? Nothing? Is there one more? There's a lucky last question. Where you go, down the front. Yep, you're on.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's a comment to what you said, that I was fortunate enough to be on Helena's leadership course. I was given a scholarship by Helena's team on International Women's Day. So it's an excellent program. I've been such an advocate. I haven't been paid. But it empowers you. So if anyone is thinking to do a leadership course, it empowers you to create influence, impact, and think good about yourself. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Pretty good. One last question. Anything else? Yep, up the back. Blue dress over there. And this will be the last one, but people will be around afterwards, so please feel free to have further questions. Where you go.
Thanks everyone for your presentations. It was inspiring. Thank you very much. My question is very simple. What kind of book would you recommend for all of us to read? And, I know we mentioned leadership, we mentioned, well-being and implementation science potentially, or, clinical research. So what is a book that you would recommend for all of us to read heading into Christmas break, hopefully having some time on our hands?
Great question, Veronica. Nice question. I like it. And mine, I've read a good book lately, but it probably doesn't. Anyway, where you go, Shilpa.
So our book club has just done, and it was my book to present, has just done the book called Wifedom by Anna Funder. It's actually in all of the bookstores at the moment. It's about George Orwell's wife, and oh my gosh, it's going to make you so angry. But read it, you'll be so mad. But it's wonderful and very inspiring about the unseen and unsung work of women behind the men who become famous. So it's definitely a book of its time.
Anyone else got a book?
I'm a fail on that one. I really don't think I can actually give you a book. Part of the reason is I'm very experiential in my learning. So for me, I need to be in a group and I need to learn from and absorb and soak up. And I read very lightweight things because that's my escapism. So I'm more likely to suggest a romance novel than anything else. As disappointing as that might be, but I do think that you've got to recognise how you learn and what inspires you and what motivates you. And I just know that's not my drive.
Karen, have you got a book?
No, I like those sort of books too. But movies, some of the movies, and I can't even think of what but it's about the 2 or 3 black American NASA.
Oh, that was a great, what was that called?
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures,
Watch that if you
one.
haven't watched that. That was a beauty. Yeah, great. Got a book? That's right.
I can't remember its name.
That's right. We can circle back on that one.
The one about the chemistry of lessons in chemistry.
Yeah. Has everyone read that one?
Yeah, the book's good fun.
The book's great. And the one I did just finish, I will tell you, because it is a good holiday read. It's an amazing story. It's one of the best books I've ever read. It's Trent Dalton's Lola in the Mirror. And if you haven't read that, it is breathtaking. It's about a very strong woman. And, it's called Lola in the Mirror. Fabulous story. So, look, I think with those comments, I'm going to ask the panel for one very quick last statement, and then we're going to move on to the presentation. You're going to say, what's your advice? And it's only a short one. Advice to the group.
Just keep learning. Put yourself in new situations all the time and keep learning.
That's great.
Be courageous and have fun.
Have fun. Lots of fun.
Yeah, lots of fun.
Wow. Okay, so with that, I'd like to say the takeouts that I had from it, accept recognition and accept acknowledgement. When people actually say, just say thank you, and don't say, well, that's not me. Just say thank you. So I think that's the first one. Believe in yourself, and I've got to practice that as well myself, but we need to get better at doing that. That relationships really matter, and so what you invest in people and what they probably invest back in you are really important, and I think we do that really well, so make sure that works. Work on your external mentors, and if you haven't got any that aren't people that are in your workplace, identify some people you can go and have a coffee with and have a chat with. It doesn't have to be formalised. You don't have to say, will you be my mentor? Just build relationships with people around you that you can have a chat with that give you that different perspective. Lift your eyes. What I mean by that is people get very stuck in their own project. So lift your eyes and look out and across every now and then, and really train yourself to lift your eyes and look across, and don't just be stuck in your thing. Really important thing for me if you're going to actually be impactful and you're going to do things differently and see more than what you're the expert in. And I think, like the rest of them, be brave and keep flexible. Phew, that's the takeaway for me in my life. Be flexible and be ready to pivot when you need to. So put your hands together for our fabulous panel. So thank you. You guys can actually exit stage left, and that's over there. And we're going to just bring Leanna up here, and we're going to present our fellowships. Okay, so next we're going to actually present something that I'm really proud of in South Australia. So as you've heard, that the Women's Health Research Translation Network has had some fellowships. There was 36 fellowships that were awarded, and those for early and mid-career researchers. So it wasn't for the top dogs, it was actually for the people who have got their plans, working on where they're going, and really investing in what they want to be as they evolve. So the inaugural ones, and they are a one-off 12-month financial support to facilitate career advancement and development in women in early and mid-career stages of their research careers. This was competitive, and it was quite a competitive award, and it provided candidates with up to $10,000, and they also got career development activities and advancement activities, and they were able to have the opportunity to join a network and share experiences, build collaborations, and broaden skills. So not only did they get some money, they had to compete for it. It's for a year, and then they got to do some other things that were development opportunities. So there were 36 of these across Australia, as I mentioned. I'd like to congratulate people in this room that South Australia got 10 of those. That's pretty impressive. The first round were awarded in 2021, and you might recall 2021, it was a pretty hazy year, but we had 4 people who were able to go through and get those. Sorry, I'll just move on to these. So Leanna and I are going to, next one, yep. Leanna and I are going to work on it. Leanna's we did some other presentations last week, didn't we, to some other award winners in South Australia, so we're really very keen to be recognising great people doing great things. So what I'd like to do now, and I'm not going to give everybody a chance to talk about their projects, unfortunately, because we'll go on for too long, but what we are going to do is write a little summary and circulate it all to you on each of the projects and each of the people that got funded, but you'll get a bit of a sense of it. So first of all, I'd like to invite Randy up. Help me out with this one. Randy. Hewinson. And Randy is from the Adelaide University and Samri, and was one of our 2021 awardees. Thank you. And we're going to have a big group photo afterwards, so if you can just, thank you. Our next one is Dr. Jessica Greiger from University of Adelaide. Come on up, Jess. I know, we do need that. We should do this side. Yeah, that's it. Our next is also from the University of Adelaide, and Dr. Prabna Andrew Weera. Prabha. Terrible with the names. Apologies, Pravna. And we've... Oops. Here we go. Got it? And finally, Dr. Jane Chalmers is our 4th recipient from the University of South Australia. That was in the 2021 round. Jane's unable to be there today, but we'd like to acknowledge also that that's great that she was an awardee, and we'll make sure she gets her certificate. So put your hands together for 2021. Okay, now jump forward to 2023, and what's really pleasing about this is we've got 6 in this pool, and they actually cover off a lot of the partners. HTSA, you'll know that we've got Samri is a key partner, the University of Adelaide, University of Flinders University, Torrens University, and University of SA. And we've actually got fellows from all of them have come through this program, so that's great. So now we would like to present these. So our first one is Dr. Belinda Luna from Torrens University. Our next one, did you get a photo? Another one. Our next recipient is Celine Northcott from Samri. Now these were all, there was lots of applications, and these guys were, you know, awarded on their merit across the country, so congratulations. Our next is Dr. Jodie Avery from University of Adelaide. Great job. Our next is Dr. Melissa Pathirani. Sorry, Melissa. Come on up. From the University of Adelaide. Our next one is Associate Professor Zora Lassie from the University of Adelaide. And finally, unfortunately, Dr. Lauren Lyons was unable to be here today, but she's from Flinders University, and she's the final recipient of the 2023 awards. So I just wanted to acknowledge that over the next little while, we're going to be working to capture the stories of each of these fellows and share the difference they make, and not only with the projects they're working on, but also their contribution to them. In light of today's story, today's night, of how people grow through this. So what difference is the fellowship making in your life? And so please, if you just receive one of those, you're going to have to answer a few questions. So, you know, get ready for it. Also, I just wanted to mention that today I was lucky enough to go and meet with the minister, and I had to be brave, number one. But also, you know, we need to be telling these stories. These people are wondering what the heck we're all doing. And so the more that we can get our stories out there, the better. So when we ask, you know, say, oh, tell us what you're doing, or tell us what impact you're having, or telling what you've done, please, 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 be really thinking about it. It doesn't have to be a long thing. It doesn't have to be a paper. It just has to be a paragraph, and you have to be able to write around impact. So just keep thinking that and nuancing that as you work through it. So we're really trying to build a pipeline of great women and great researchers across the board, but also working with clinicians and in that translation piece. We want to understand more about the fellows in the future, as I said, and I think there might be some other calls coming up in the future with this initiative. So keep your eyes out, and look, we can be successful as well as anyone else in this country. So I want you to have the confidence to put your hand up, put your name forward, and go for it. So thanks to Leanna for presenting the awards, and right straight after we finish this, which will be in a couple of moments, you'll get to stretch your legs. I'd like everyone who was a winner or if you're part of the presenting panel, to just come over to the side, probably on this side actually, and we'll just do a quick photo. So thanks very much for coming today. I'm going to hand back to Deb to wrap us up, but just to say really appreciate your support of the network, and we look forward to 2024.
Thanks, Wendy. So my job is to do all of the thank yous. Let me start with our presenters and their really amazing, motivating stories. So thank you to you. I'd like to thank our fellows. And I think, Wendy's pointed out that we're 100% behind you and you should celebrate your accomplishments. Thank you to Leanna. For HTSA for their ongoing support of the network. We couldn't do it without that framework. Mirsa, who's up the back, who was behind this event this evening. She organised the event and the network, and also Tiana and Tamara for their work in the past few weeks. The great work that's happening with the grant that Wharton has commissioned, and Nadia and Marion's work in that area, the loneliness grant. And I would like to also thank Marion, who's my co-chair. And for those who are here tonight, I wanted to let you know that we are continually refreshing our governance group, with a view to keeping things very responsive. And so I want to thank all those who joined the leadership group for 2024. And they're going to determine the program for our capacity building and for our networking. And lastly, to recommend that you get involved and that you stay involved. And there are other HTSA activities that I wanted to highlight. There's an implementation science network. There's a consumer and community involvement network. And there's really excellent courses. If you jump on the website for Wharton, you'll see that there are excellent online courses that you can do. So there'll be a photo, and please enjoy your networking after we close this evening. Thank you very much.